hear me in the back? Gina. Nope, she's not hearing me.
She can't hear you.
No, I said, can you hear me back there? Okay. All right, we're good. Okay, I want to start tonight by updating you on what is happening with these wars that are going on. Israel is still fighting Hamas, and they are about done with what they wanted to accomplish, but as soon as they are, they will be starting a new war on their northern border with another group called Hezbollah. The Iran-backed Houthis, which is another terrorist group, are attacking container ships in the Red Sea, and that in turn has caused the United States and Britain to bomb Houthi targets in Yemen. Now, the Russia-Ukraine war is still going on. This weekend will make its second year. And there is a lot of talk going on lately about the Russian war to some of the European states along its border. Because of this, Poland has put their military on high alert. The Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are building defensive installations along their border. And Estonia is also building over 600 bunkers along their border. Also, because of this, there's 31 NATO nations, along with Sweden and the US, that are right now in a military exercise that's the biggest one that they have had since the Cold War. And that's supposed to run through, I think, May or June. Things are still heating up with China and Taiwan. We have a fleet of battleships in the South China Sea. China does too. And probably because of that, the leader of North Korea is again threatening nuclear war. He does that a lot. We have military bases in Iraq, Syria, and Jordan that have been attacked nearly 200 times since last October. We have lost some soldiers, and many of them have been injured. So the war is expanding. I cannot still tell you for sure if this is the Sixth Trumpet War, but it's sure going in that direction. Now, because of that, I felt tonight to talk just a little bit here. I've got several topics here that I want to cover, but for a few minutes, I want to talk about preparing for when the war reaches the United States. And whether that would be this war, this that's going on now, or whether that's yet to come a little ways down the road, it would still be a good idea to think about preparations, because the longer we have to prepare, then we can just do it little by little. Making preparations does not mean that you don't have faith in God's provision.
Amen.
An elderly minister told me many years ago, Oma Ellis, I don't know if anybody here knows her, she had a long conversation with me one day when I was first in church, and one of the things that she had said that I always remembered was, God gave us a brain, He expects us to use it.
Right.
And I think about Joseph in Genesis 41, where he stored up the food because there was 7 years of famine coming. So he was making preparations. Now, here in central Nebraska, I don't expect that they would target us right here where we would have a nuclear bomb drop right on top of Hastings or something. I mean, we don't have anything right here that they would be interested in wasting a bomb on. So I don't really expect that to happen. But there are a couple of things that could affect us when you have a nuclear war going on. And one of them is a loss of electricity. And another one is the possibility of fallout. So there's two ways that we could end up with losing electricity. One would be a cyber attack. That would basically mess up the computer systems in the electric grid. And I don't really know how long that would take for them to find it and fix it. I couldn't really find any estimations on that. But I will tell you that a couple of weeks ago, we found hackers in the grid. They had been in there 5 years.
You found what?
There were men who were hacking into the electric grid. And they were sponsored by China. So, and whether there's more in there that we haven't found yet, or whether there'll be new ones crop up, we don't know. But these ones had been 5 years undetected. And it was Microsoft company that managed to find them. Now, the other thing that could cause us to lose electricity would be an EMP. That's an electromagnetic pulse that would happen when a nuclear bomb is set off high up into the atmosphere. And that would, in my own opinion, not that I know a whole lot about all this stuff, but I know a little, that, in my opinion, would actually be the worst thing, worse than even the cyber attack, because with that pulse, you would end up with your electronic and electrical parts being destroyed. I mean, they'd be damaged to where they'd have to either be somehow repaired or replaced. And the problem, one of the bigger problems in that scenario is that the large transformers are not made in the United States anymore. They're made in China. And if we're in war with China, I don't think they're going to want to give us any. So I'm not sure who else makes them. Hopefully there's somewhere else they could get them. The companies have said, and I'm talking about the power companies, some of them do have this particular type of scenario that I found one. I don't think it's the one for our grid. We actually have 3 major and some minor grids throughout the United States. But one of them that I had gotten into, and I couldn't find it again to double check and see which one it was, but they were saying step by step, I went through all the steps that they have to go through when something like this happens, and oh, it was just unreal what all they have to do before they can even get started replacing parts. And so their estimation is that they felt like it would take a minimum of a couple months before they could get the electricity up and running again in a scenario like that. And unfortunately, they said it could take longer. So they said that your short line systems and stuff that has short antennas were less likely to be affected, because it wouldn't just be the power grid that would be damaged. It would be, you know, electrical and electronic stuff that you have. But they said that some of these things would be less likely to be affected, and they named a few examples, which were vehicles, handheld radios, and disconnected portable generators. But they said that the long line connections, or the stuff with tall antennas, would be damaged, and that would include the internet, telephones, the ones that are like landlines, which I have one, and your cell phone tower transmitters would be ruined. So cell phones would not work either. If the grid was to go down for an extended period of time, and we were without electricity during that time, one of the major problems would be that you can't pump water out of the ground. We don't have many hand pumps left around the country where you sit there and you crank those things until you finally get water. There aren't many of those left around. Most everything that you're going to get water out of the ground is got to have electricity. So that would be the biggest problem. But there's a whole lot of other problems. Transportation would come to a standstill because gas pumps need electricity to pump the gas out of the ground. And it wouldn't just be gasoline, it would include diesel, it would include natural gas, and all your other fuels, which would be a problem for the backup generators. You know, hospitals in different places have backup generators, but once they ran out of fuel, then they'd have a problem getting more fuel. Because those systems, they run through pipes under the ground, and at some point in that system, there's a part of it that needs electricity. And so if that part can't function, then the whole system can't function. So there would be a problem with getting fuel. Banks would likely not open. They can't really do business when the internet's down. Everything's computerized, so you might want to consider keeping some extra cash on hand. Because if the stores would open up during the days to sell what stock they have left, they're not going to be able to take a credit card. So you might want to have some cash on hand. It would be prudent to have some emergency supplies, water being the most critical. You know, you can go quite a while actually without food, but you're not going to go too awfully long without water. So my suggestion would be start buying extra containers of water. You know, you could buy those big jugs. That's what we did. We bought several of those big jugs like you put in that fountain back there. And then we can just dump it out and refill it every once in a while to keep fresh water in it. And we don't have to keep spending money on bottled water then. But store as much water as you have room for. You know, they used to say when I was first in church, do your best, and then God will do the rest. Flashlights, food, extra batteries, a heat source that doesn't take electricity, because if it's winter time, it's going to get awful cold. First aid, sanitation needs, whatever you can think of that might be needed if there was no electricity for an extended period of time. One thing I would highly recommend that every family buy is a little battery-operated NOAA weather radio. Make sure it's the ones that are the NOAA certified. Because, not because you need to know what the weather's doing, but because the government has in place a plan that if there is a national emergency, they will put out alerts and information over where you could pick them up over those radios. Televisions aren't going to be working in a scenario like this, and the internet would be down. So about the only way you're going to have any outside communication would be to have one of those little radios. Now, being that it has the short antenna, it's not likely to be damaged, but just to be on the safe side, and this is what we have done, we have a little metal file box that we had for years. And so we have stored that radio inside of that because that metal box will act like a Faraday cage and it would protect it from an EMP pulse. On the top of your handout sheet, it's the part that I said for more information, that first thing on there, or no, maybe it's the last thing on there, tells where you can get one of those radios. And they're only like $20 or $25. They're not real expensive. Now the other thing that could affect us here in central Nebraska would be fallout. Most people think that if there's incoming nuclear bombs, that they're going to try to bomb cities because they'll want to kill a lot of people. That's not their first targets. In fact, that's somewhere down the line of what they would go after. Their first targets are going to be our missile silos. because that's where our nuclear bombs are to strike them back. And they don't want us to strike them back. So that's going to be their first targets. So we have 3 locations in the United States where these missiles are at: Montana, North Dakota, and the Panhandle of Nebraska. And since the ones in Nebraska are only less than 300 miles away, and we are downwind from them, there is the possibility that we could get some fallout here. It'll depend on several things, though. It depends on the size of the bombs, the number of bombs that get through and hit in that area, and it depends on the wind speed and the wind direction. So you'd have to have all of that in place before we would get any here. But should it be that way, we could get some here. The main thing that you would need is shelter and shielding. And if you have a basement, you already have shelter. By going down and staying in your basement for a while, you're already going to have about half the protection that you need. Just don't stay on the first floor or an upper floor. For shielding, you need very dense material, something that's not porous, something that's not going to allow gamma rays to penetrate it. And that would include so many inches of certain materials, and I'll get to that in just a minute. The simplest, easiest thing I found, and I've been through a lot of these scenarios, looking up things, you know, for what people can do. I've been studying this stuff ever since I started working for End Time over 20 years ago. So it's not like I just started researching this last fall. I've been researching this stuff for a very long time. But what I found that would be the easiest and least expensive thing to do would be to find yourself a very sturdy table, a table that could hold a lot of weight, not a round table. You want a rectangle table, and you want to put it against the walls in a corner of your basement. Once you have it moved into the corner, and you want this table to be big enough that your family can get underneath of it. So once you have it in the corner, 2 sides are already going to be shielded, plenty shielded. So you're not going to have anything get through on those 2 sides. So the only thing you have to worry about is the other 2 sides and the top. Now the top, and really the sides too, but you could put across the top of the table, if you have a lot of books, books would be great because you only need 16 inches. You need 16 inches high of books across your table. That will give you plenty of shielding from the fallout that would be sticking on your roof. Water, if you don't have a lot of books, water. But you'd need 24 inches of water. If you got some of those storage containers, those big plastic tubs, they're roughly 2 feet. You could put some of those across the table, fill them up with water. That'll give you plenty of shielding. Yeah, there might be gaps in between, so you can stuff some books in there. There's other suggestions, other things you could do if you wanted to get a little more elaborate. There is a book called Fallout Protection for Homes with Basements. It's listed on your handout sheet. It's in a PDF file online, so you can read it. It's a booklet, not a book, so it's not very long to read, and there'll be some more suggestions in there. It's on your handout sheet. If you just, type in that link and it'll take you right to it. Now, that's all I'm going to cover on the electricity and the fallout. There's a few things on your handout sheet that will help you get started on a few other things, but there is one thing on there. If I can find a way to stress this strong enough, I want everybody to take the time to watch the 3 videos. Now, only one of them is listed on there, but if you go to the one, you'll have the video at the top of the page. The transcript for it is right below the video, and at the bottom of the transcript, it'll say newer, older. Click on newer, it'll take you to the next video. Do the second one, then do that again, and it'll take you to the third. There are 3. They're only about 15 minutes long, so it's not going to be a big, long, drawn-out thing. But those videos, they're educational videos, and they're simple to understand. They have a lot of graphics and different things to help you understand what they're talking about. And there's a lot of super good information on there, especially about our grid and what all would not work and what supplies you might need if the grid were to go down. It's excellent videos, and like I say, it's not very long, so please take the time to go through those. Okay, now I want to go on because I've got a couple other things here that I want to touch on real quick. One is the confirmation of the covenant. In Genesis 15, God tells Abraham that he brought him to the land of Canaan to inherit it, and it would be for him and his children forever, his descendants. That is the covenant that is going to be confirmed. It has to do with Israel's right to their land. In Daniel chapter 9 and 11, there's a little bit more that mentions this covenant. First of all, God, in the chapter 9, God talks to Daniel about this time frame that's set for Israel. And it's split up into some segments, and the last segment is the part that we call the final 7 years. At the beginning of the final 7 years, the Antichrist confirms the covenant with many. A lot of people miss that part where it says with many for the 7 years. Now, when this happens, that means we've got 7 years before the Battle of Armageddon and the rapture. That means you've got 7 years left at that point to get as many people saved as possible. In chapter 11, it talks about a vile person. It's referencing the Antichrist there. It also calls him the Prince of the Covenant. And it goes on to talk about how he places the abomination that will make desolate. And there's references to that in other places, I think even in the New Testament, if I remember right. So anyway, but it helps us know that this is the Antichrist who's being talked about. Now, in the news, nearly every day now, there are articles talking about the two-state solution. The two-state solution is the confirmation of the covenant. And the reason we know that is because the two-state solution, when it is implemented, will confirm Israel's right to their land. That's what this two-state solution is all about. 2 states, because they're going to give land in the area called Judea. It's the West Bank area that they refer to today. They're going to give that land to the Palestinians. And we know from the Bible that that's going to happen because Jesus said those that be in Judea, because the Jewish settlers are going to stay out there even though it's going to belong to the Palestinians. And Jesus told them, when you see the abomination of desolation, those that are in Judea need to flee. So we know there's going to be a Palestinian state in the West Bank, and they're going to confirm Israel's right to be in their state. Because right now, there's a lot of places that don't believe Israel has a right to that land and shouldn't be there. So this two-state solution will confirm their right to the land. Now, I have been, like I say, I've been into all of this for over 20 years. And I would find articles every once in a while that talked about the two-state solution, and I would use that for the articles I sent into End Time. However, I have never seen it like I'm seeing it right now. It's every day, every day. World leaders are pushing this so hard right now. And somebody even said, I believe we can do this even without Israel's consent. So they're really pushing for it. Now, Brother Baxter did not know, he said that he could not tell from Scripture which happens first, the sixth trumpet war or the confirmation of the covenant. They have leaned toward believing the war would come first, but he said you couldn't tell for sure from Scripture. So we've got both of these things in the news right now, hot and heavy. So one or the other or both are going to happen very soon, I'm sure. Now, I also wanted to tell you real quickly about the red heifer. If you want to know some of the details about why Israel needs a red heifer, you can read about that in Numbers chapter 19. Right now, Israel has 4 red heifers that are qualified and are of the right age. They are, well, before I say this, I got to tell you one thing. They don't call it a sacrifice. They were explaining this to some people a while back, and I just learned about this recently. They were explaining the difference between what happens with the red heifer and the animal sacrifices that they do. And they said, so this that they do with the red heifer is called a purification ceremony. So they're planning to do this ceremony on Passover in April. There was some talk about possibly waiting until June, but most of them are pushing for Passover. So this is going to happen real soon, and what that will do is it enables them to cleanse all of Israel so that they're purified, so that as soon as the temple is built, they can immediately start the animal sacrifices. Now, the one other thing that I wanted to tell you about tonight, and I just found out about this last week. In Papua New Guinea, there are gold mines, and they are one of the places in the world that has the largest, one of the largest amounts of gold. They don't mine every year for various reasons, and that would take too long to explain, but in 2022 they were mining, and they took out 50 metric tons of gold in 1 year. And they've been doing this off and on for a long time. They've had gold there forever. But to make a long story short, and I wish I had time to tell you this whole thing because it's fascinating, but to make it short, a Jewish man from Israel ended up in Papua New Guinea. While he was there, their head of their police, they call him the Minister of Police, was talking to him about a tribe that lives in Papua New Guinea. And that tribe has an ancient story that has been handed down through the generations over the centuries about how their ancestors had given gold to Solomon for the temple. And they went through a whole big presentation with this thing when some other people were telling the story about what it says in 1 Kings. The Queen of Sheba had brought some of the gold, but Solomon had a whole lot more gold than what she brought. And this tribe is saying it was their ancestors who had given this gold. Now, off the shore of Papua New Guinea is a little group of islands called the Solomon Islands. So now, I'm not going to stand here and say that this is a for sure true story. I don't know. But whether it is true or not, the tribe heard about Israel wanting to build their third temple. So they have opened the mine, and they are mining right now, and they are going to give 33% of whatever they take out to Israel for their third temple. Wow. Yeah, exciting stuff. I think they're going to be having an article about this in one of the upcoming End Time magazines, so you'll want to watch for that. Okay, now that's all I have for tonight. Do you have any questions?
The two-state solution that you were talking about, is that the beginning of the shared temple mount? Is that part of the whole, or am I way off?
But what happens is, and I think I talked about this once when I taught before. That's where it's going to be a sticking point in getting it done. Because Israel doesn't want to split up Jerusalem. They don't want to share the Temple Mount, all that kind of stuff. So what's going to end up happening is that part of the deal is going to be put on hold for 7 years. That's why the whole thing is a 7-year period of time that they're going to do the confirming for. What they were going to want to do is come back at the end of that 7 years to do some renegotiating and see if they can get it settled. When they can, that's when they decide to attack. That's when the Armageddon War begins, because it's over that issue. That's why they're coming down against Jerusalem and trying to take over in Jerusalem. Any other questions?
So the plan for sending out emergency alerts and things through the NOAA, that's still radio signals?
I don't, that part I don't know. I assume so. I don't know.
Okay, because I just wonder how, if an EMP goes off and everything else is down, I understand the short antennas keeping your own thing in the Faraday cage, but how are they going to broadcast that nationwide if your radio towers are kaput?
I don't know, supposedly they're going to be able to do it. So I don't have an answer for that one.
I'll spend $20 for a chance. I'm just curious.
Do some searching and see if you can find answers to that, and then you can let us all know.
Okay.
And I have a question on the nuclear silos. If, say, America detects nukes are coming in, and they say, okay, we're going to fire back, is typically what I'm always assuming is the response, okay, we're going to fire back. Would those silos then be empty, and would they be a target in the first place if the enemy is thinking, or am I way off base here?
I always thought we had missiles that could target them and knock them out before they get here. I found out that's not the case. The Department of Defense has a YouTube, and just recently they put up a video that I watched because they were all happy about a targeting system like that they had that was successful, had a high success rate and everything. They were telling all about it in that video. However, they also told in that video that our targeting system is for what they call rudimentary nuclear missiles. They said that they are not for targeting the missiles, the more sophisticated missiles that China and Russia would have. As far as I know, we don't have anything for that unless it's some top secret thing we don't know about. But according to the Department of Defense, they don't have targeting for China and Russia's missiles because they're more sophisticated. They said that what our strategy has been for them for the last 70-some years is a strategy of deterrence, meaning that, see, the three countries have signed treaties together. There are certain things that they've agreed to that they would not do in order to prevent a nuclear arms race. And the agreements don't prevent us from developing nuclear bombs, but it does prevent us from the type of things that would make each other's bombs null and void. And